Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being with us today. Jason, thank you for engineering your favorite broadcast at Genesis Communications Network. We really appreciate all the effort you put into making USA Prepares as good as we can possibly make it. Kyle's with us today. Welcome, Kyle.
Good morning, Vince. How are you this morning?
I'm doing really well. So, Kyle, you had a suggestion, and you get the full credit for this. You suggested, why don't we take calls and talk about whatever preparedness questions that our class may have? And I thought, what a great idea. So, I don't think we've ever done that. So, here we are breaking new ground. So, kind of like open lines, but about preparedness, okay? Please stay in the preparedness aisle, class. And if you'd like to call us, we'll pay for the call, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. In the meantime, Kyle and I have a lesson prepared for you. We haven't discussed it other than the topic, and that topic is the continuation of the tire class. And we're going to be talking about tires and wheels and things that go wrong and things that probably the guy, and guy is generic, meaning guy or gal, who mounts your tire, who sells you your tire, probably doesn't even know. Okay? There are certain intricacies of tire mounting, tire wheel balancing, tire placement. How do you place that tire on the wheel? The orientation of the tire with respect to the valve stem. Is there a difference? Does it matter which way the tire goes? So let's say you put a chalk line on the outside of the tire, a brand new tire, and you've got your wheel. So your wheel is without a tire, and your tire is without a wheel, and you have those two pieces. Does it make a difference where you put that tire on the wheel? So if you have a chalk line on the tire, you just draw a line anywhere, and you say, okay, that's at 12 o'clock. Does it matter whether that line that you draw on that tire is pointing to the valve stem, or is it irrelevant? We're going to teach you that. And I believe that's something that very few tire people even pay attention to. Kyle, do you have any comments about tires and your thoughts before we, delve into the intricacies?
Can I jump off track just for a little bit, Vince?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I do it all the time.
I will come back to tires. But I've been considering, and this is going to directly relate to tires, folks. Believe me, it's not going to seem like it at first, but I'm going to come back. I've been pondering and thinking about the general state of our country and the Biden presidency. I'm going to get a little political here, but it's for a particular reason. And it really does have to come back to preparedness. So, on one hand, a magician likes a sleight of hand. They like to have you looking at one hand or looking at the pretty girl that's right next to them while they're doing something else with their other hand. Well, on one hand, we see Biden talking like a fool to Putin, calling him a killer, and having these negotiations with China and getting up in their face and causing offense and all of these different things. That's one hand. On the other hand, what is he doing? He is accomplishing the communist directives for bringing a country under subjection. And that is looking like this. He is spending money, what little, if you want to call it leeway, that we have on developing a communist country. He's spending our into oblivion. There's no possible way any of this could ever be paid back. And he's spending it to the point, but why would somebody do that? Because the goal of the communist agenda and the one world government agenda is to get rid of the dollar reserve status. And if that happens, because right now, think about this, everybody in the world has to spend their money to buy dollars to be able to purchase stuff on the world currency. I'm not talking blanket perfect, because there's obviously other countries that are starting to move away from the dollar. But I'm saying, generally speaking, it's trying to get rid of the reserve currency of the dollar. If that happens, they're going to be trying to go, from what I can study and see, to this SDR, special drawing rights currency. And that accomplishes, if that happens, it accomplishes two things. One, because nobody has to buy dollars anymore, we have to spend dollars to buy special drawing rights because the dollar has been so devalued. So the devaluation of the dollar is going to cause us to have to buy SDRs at a higher price. So that means overnight, by that I mean within weeks, from the time they accomplish that, we will be spending 30% to 40% more for everything, because now SDRs will be what determines the purchasability, if you'll allow me that word, of goods worldwide. Well, that accomplishes a couple of things for the communists. It accomplishes that we in this country are on the same level as the insane policies and directives of Europe, where they're paying $8-9 a gallon for gasoline and way high prices for food. Theirs are going to go even higher. So the reason they're trying to get rid of your guns right now is so you cannot do anything about it. But it also does something else that is even more evil. It puts the entire world underneath the control of the World Bank. Everybody then is going to the World Bank to buy their SDRs, which makes them even stronger and more powerful. But how this fits into a preparedness is kind of obvious. Everything you buy, tires, I don't care, from the smallest part to the biggest part, is going to have to be bought and pay. You're going to have to pay more for it in order to purchase and have anything to be prepared for. So prepare by getting everything you can possibly afford to do before that agenda is accomplished. So that's just an exhortation there this morning to try to hopefully figure this out, and we'll go on with the tire situation. But no, Vince, I don't have any particular. You're talking about something there that I've never seen a tire guy ever orientate a tire in my life, and personally, I've heard of it, but I never really thought about it. But I've never seen a guy orientate a tire specifically to the valve stem. So continue, please.
Okay, and this one of the things that we do here at USA Prepares is we try to dig a little deeper than just, snippets and just rapid fire. So the reason that I know this is we have a tire shop, and I'm curious about everything. And if you notice, class, if you buy tires, I was talking to Jason about this, he's aware of this, that there are dots on tires on the outside. And what are they? So some tires have a yellow dot on the outside sidewall. A round yellow dot, a little smaller than a dime. And all tires that I know of have a red dot. So there's a red dot for sure, and a yellow dot, maybe. Well, the red dot indicates the primary balance point of that tire. So the red is it marks the minimum, let's see. I'm trying to figure out the best way to say this.
Minimum out of balance?
The red dot is the minimum weight point of the tire, the minimum weight point.
Okay.
So if you were to look at let's say you were to put the tire flat on the ground, not standing on the tread, but flat, and you were to suspend that tire so you could figure out where the heaviest point is. Well, the heaviest point would be opposite the red dot. So the red dot is the minimum weight point. So the idea is when you mount a tire, you want the red dot to be aligned with the heaviest point of the wheel. Now that point is where the valve stem is. Okay? That's the heaviest point of the wheel. So what you do is you simply align that red dot with the valve stem. It's as simple as that. Now there's a little slogan, red rules, red, R-E-D, red dot, rules. Now that means if there's a yellow dot, the red dot takes precedence over the yellow dot in most cases. So the yellow dot may be at a different location. So what you do is you simply put the red dot right where the valve stem is, lined up with the valve stem. And when you do that, you will put the minimum amount of weight on the tire and the maximum weight on the wheel in the same orientation, so that when you add wheel weights to balance the tire, you add the minimum amount of wheel weights. So your tire will balance more properly, actually properly. And that's what manufacturers recommend doing. But even as a assistant service manager at a dealership, they don't teach that, right, Kyle?
No, nope. That is totally true, Vince. I've been around it. Actually, when I managed a parts store many years ago, one of the first jobs I had after my wife and I got married, the tire shop in there had 7 bays. It was huge, and we sold a ton of tires. And I never remember that. I mean, I don't remember any of that. You're teaching me something myself.
Okay, and here's another thing. So when I learned how to mount tires, one of my very first jobs as a after school part-time job was working as a mechanic for Sears, Roebuck and Company in their automotive center, which is across the parking lot from the big store. And when we come back, I'll tell you about balancing tires and the way we did it with a bubble balancer, which will indicate why you need to pay attention to how your tires are mounted. We'll be right back. So class, today it's going to take a little bit of thinking, and I don't know if you can understand these concepts if you just put us in the background. So you may have to actually pay attention to the detail of what we're talking about. So when I was trained as a mechanic at Sears, Roebuck and Company back in 1970, they taught me how to balance tires. And we did not have a spin balancer. We did not have a dynamic balancer. We had a static balancer. And a static balancer is that system where you take the wheel and tire assembly and you take all the wheel weights off it and you put it horizontally on this balancer, and it has a bubble in the center, kind of like a level, a 360-degree level if you look down at the bubble. And the bubble tells you where the heavy point is. So what you do is, let's say the heavy point is at 12 o'clock. We'll just say you're looking down, and if you imagine a clock, you say, okay, this is 12 o'clock. You put the wheel weights at the opposite side of the tire, okay, from the heavy point. And you use 4 weights. 4. So what you do is, let's say you figure out that this tire needs 4 ounces. Now, that's a lot of weight, and I would not want to balance a tire with 4 ounces. But let's say 4 ounces. What you do is you put 2 of the weights, one on top of the other, and let's say you put that at the 7 o'clock position. And you take 2 more weights and you put that at the 5 o'clock position. And you move them in or out so that you get that bubble to 0, to the point where the weights actually counterbalance the heavy spot on the wheel tire assembly. Now, why do you use 4? Because you don't know, with that type of a system, where the heavy spot is. You don't know if it's at the center of the tire. You don't know if it's on the inboard side of the tire and wheel. You don't know if it's the outboard side. So you average by using 4 weights. And by averaging, you can kind of get that tire fairly well balanced in a static method. But that means that it's balanced when the wheel and tire are not moving. And that's the way we used to do it before we had electronic spin balancers. So it was okay, but it wasn't as good as what's called a dynamic balance, the type of system that we use today. Kyle, do you have any comments about that kind of a system? Have you ever used that kind?
Yes, I have, Vince. It brings back a lot of memories because a long time ago when we were in the automotive class back in high school, we had a balancer, and it was those static balancers back in the 70s. So, yeah, I agree. You're correct, exactly as usual.
Well, I don't know if I'm correct as usual, but some of the time, or part of some of the time, or maybe even most of part of the time. I don't know. But so it's important to balance your wheel tire assembly. Now, your wheel from the factory is out of balance, and your tire from the factory is out of balance. Now, they try to get them pretty close. They try to get them so when they spin, they don't have these out of balance conditions. But when you take an out of balance wheel, which is probably I would guess, except for race cars, I would say that just about every single wheel is out of balance, even Mercedes at some point. Now, Mercedes is pretty darn good, but they're not perfect. And I don't think any wheel is perfect that's not been rebalanced for race car use. But the tire's out of balance and the wheel's out of balance. Now, when you match them together, they're still going to be out of balance. So the idea is to minimize that out of balance condition. And that's why you put the red dot on the brand new tire to line up with the valve stem. Okay? That will minimize the out of balance condition, but the tire is not balanced yet, or the tire wheel assembly is not balanced just because you did that. Now, there's another dot, the yellow dot, and that takes second place to the red dot in most cases. The yellow dot is the minimum radial runout point of the tire. So what that means is when you look at the tire, if you had a perfect wheel, it was perfectly round, and you mounted that tire on that perfectly round wheel and you rotated it, you would find out that the wheel, that the tread actually is not the same distance from the center point of that tire all the way around the tire. So what I'm saying is it has a radial runout, and it may be an eighth of an inch, but that eighth of an inch could cause problems depending on the vehicle that it's on and the weight of the tire and the weight of the vehicle. We'll be right back. So roughly 50 years ago, I was trained how to balance tires. And something else I was trained about, and that was the amount of weight. So let's say we've got this tire and I mounted a brand new tire on the wheel, and I put it on the balancer, a static balancer, and I'm looking down, and gosh, it's taking 6 ounces, 7 ounces, 8 ounces of weight. It's a lot of weight. And you can see these when you look at these strips, these wheel weights that are curved to match the rim of the wheel, and you can see how much weight is being added. Now, if you add a lot of weight, that means the tire is really out of balance. The tire and wheel assembly are really out of balance. And here's what I was taught. And it's absolutely correct. If you see a situation where the wheel tire, you just got done mounting this heavy tire on this heavy wheel and you put it on the balancer and it looks like it's going to take a lot of weight to balance this. What you do is you mark the tire and the wheel and you dismount it. You don't balance it. You take it off the balancer and you take the tire and you loosen the tire from the wheel and you rotate the tire 180 degrees. And the reason for that is that large amount of weight that the wheel balancer says that you need to add tells you that the heavy spot of the wheel is lined up pretty well with the heavy spot of the tire. Now, if you rotate the tire 180 degrees from where it was, you will put the heavy spot of the tire opposite the heavy spot of the wheel. And by doing that, the wheel will be better balanced to begin with before you add the weights, and then when you add the weights, it'll be way better balanced. Kyle, any of your comments?
No, you're absolutely correct, Vince. I've done that myself. If you've got way too much weight on your tire, you're not going to get near the life out of it, even if you can get it balanced with a whole bunch of weight. The other thing about the run out that you mentioned before, boy, have I seen that before. I've seen a brand new tire, and like you said, this thing was probably, once you got it on there, I'll bet it was at least a quarter of an inch run out from a brand new tire. Now, it did balance, but, and I wasn't the one doing it at the time because I was the assistant manager, but I was watching this guy, and he just couldn't hardly believe, because you could see it with your eye. And he just couldn't hardly believe it, but it balanced. And so, of course, he just put it on there and went ahead and did it and went ahead and sold it. But in my opinion, when they have that kind of run out, even if you can get them balanced, that's the belts on the outside of the tire that's on the inside of the tread, but, it's on the casing, inside the casing. I think eventually there was something cast wrong with that, and it's going to eventually cause that belt to separate and give you problems where the tire will be ruined.
Yeah. And how many guys that mount tires really pay attention to the radial run out and the side run out? Now, people, when they first meet us, they go, gosh, you guys take forever. How come you can't do it the way the other guys do? They can just get 4 tires mounted, balanced, in and out, the whole job in an hour. Takes you guys a couple hours. What's with you guys? You slow? Well, it's because we pay attention to all of these details. We literally look and measure the radial run out, the side run out, whether the wheel is bent. And we look at all of these measurements, and we measure them very carefully. And when we're done with a set of tires, that car rides like a brand new car, literally, because the owner of the car has never had tires mounted and balanced properly in their life. Because generally speaking, the guys and gals that mount them don't pay attention to these details because it's a production system. Hurry, hurry, hurry. The boss doesn't want you taking 2 hours to do something that you could bang out in an hour, because he'd be paying you 2 hours worth of labor for that. And, that's money. So they don't like it when you do it that way. But we're not really in it for the money. We're in it to do the best job. And, we don't want to be the biggest. We just want to be the best. And Lee Iacocca said that, so aptly. I'm just using his terminology. But, and here's what I was taught at Sears. Day one, the shop foreman put his arm over my shoulder and he said, Vinny, remember this. Maybe the job would be big or small, do it right or not at all. And that has stayed with me, throughout my, 50 plus years after hearing him say that. So that's what we try to do. And, we go through the effort of dismounting a tire from the wheel, rotating it 180 degrees if we don't like the amount of weight if we think that it's taking too much weight. And if the tire wobbles because the wheel is bent, there's no balancing it. I mean, it will never be right. And if you have radial runout, which means that the tire, if you look at from the center point of the axle, spinning that tire, it's oblong. It has a high point and a low point, and it will bang, 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 bang with every single rotation. So even though the wheel balancer may say it is balanced, it's still not round. So you need to make sure the tire's round. You need to make sure the wheel's not bent. And when you mount a tire, there's some things that you need to do. And one of the things that we have found is with all of this road salt and beet juice that the county governments are spraying on the roads in the winter to melt the snow and ice, those road salts are corroding the wheels. And where the wheel rim meets the tire bead, it is usually corroded. And when you put your new tire on, that rough corroded surface will not allow the tire to hold air. It'll hold most of the air, but not all of the air. And eventually, tires go flat. And that's the symptom of that is when you say, gosh, the tire's flat. And you put air in it, and you look for a nail or puncture, and you can't find one. Because it's not leaking at the tread. It's leaking at the bead where the tire bead meets the rim of the wheel. Kyle?
Yep, exactly true. Yep. And you can take a little soapy mixture and spray that around the bead of the tire, and it will start bubbling. If you put a little bit of soap and some water with a spray bottle, squirt it around the outside bead there where the rim meets the tire, you'll see little soap bubbles starting to pop up and pop if you've got a leak there. And I have found personally that aluminum or magnesium rims are the worst when it comes into salty solutions. They just, for some reason, they tend to corrode even worse than steel, or much worse than steel, is my experience. And the only way to sometimes, in a steel, it'll work almost all the time, but is to take it completely apart, put the rim up there so that you can get a wire brush. Usually what we did is we always took a wire brush on a drill motor. This is many years ago, and you got different grinders and stuff with wire brushes on them. And we would take that and wire brush hit the rim and bust all of the corrosion and the rust and different things that were, kind of stuck to that rim on there. And then usually, if the guy was being pretty conscientious, after he had done that, he would take a spray can, paint the bead on the inside there, that black, and he would spray paint it black. And then after he had wire brushed it, but usually that was if you couldn't get the tire fixed, and a lot of times the shop foreman did not want them spending the time to paint the tire or to grind that off of there. They just try to squirt some stuff in there. There's little sealants that they can put in it that'll help seal that up around the outside edge of the bead. Like you said, Vince, it's production when you got a business to run, and it's very rare. In fact, you're probably the only guy I've ever heard of or seen in my entire life that'll take 2 hours to mount and balance a set of tires. Most of them are 45 minutes to an hour, and they want to get it done and get it out of there.
Well, there's a couple other things. You mentioned painting. And here's what happens. When a customer comes over here, it's our son's business, and it's right here at the farm, and they have to drop off the vehicle, and he'll leave it in the sun for a while and disinfect it and spray it with Lysol and so forth. This is all because of COVID. And they know that they can't wait for it because there's no waiting here. You drop it off, two people come, one drives a car or truck to be dropped off, and then the other person takes both of them back. And then they come back and pick it up later. But when we look at these wheels that come in for tires, if we think that there's going to be corrosion, just looking from the outside, we'll tell them that if there's corrosion, here's what this means. This means that we'll take the tire off the wheel. We'll grind it or sand it down or wire brush it, and we do it the same way with an air-driven drill, if you will, with a wire wheel on it, and we'll wear a respirator, and we will grind off or wire brush off all that corrosion. Then we paint it with Rust-Oleum, just the bead where the bead meets the rim. We'll paint that with Rust-Oleum primer for steel or for aluminum, whichever the wheel may be, and then it takes half a day at least, or a full day in the sun for those wheels to have the paint dry. That means they don't get their car until the paint dries, so we can put the tires on those wheels. And that's the only way that we know of that really works to seal the bead wheel point. Now, there is this black goo that some tire shops sell. It's kind of like rubber cement. And it's like that old-fashioned rubber cement, but it's black in color. And you just paint that on the rim, where the bead mates with the rim. And it's gooey, and yeah, it'll work for a while. But it's not the permanent 40, 50, 60,000 mile fix. It's a temporary fix. And it's the easy, quick, fast, get the customer out the door method. And the customer never knows that, because the customer is, reading magazines in the waiting room. They don't know what's going on and how bad those wheels are. But that is the proper way. The way that you describe is the proper way, as far as I know, of repairing the wheel so that it has a long-term fix. Any comments?
No, you're correct. That's exactly correct. I've had to do that on my truck rims. There's my neighbor down here who's got a tire machine set up, and I have had one of them that was leaking around the bead in particular. I usually check them anyway, and most of the time when I am changing tires, like for myself on my pickup, especially for some reason, I will wire brush, just with a wire brush, handheld wire brush, not mechanical or air or anything. Even if it's not leaking, I'll wire brush that corrosion off of the inside of the bead of the rim for myself, just to put it in there and make sure that it's as good as it can be.
We come back. Kyle mentioned checking for leaks with detergent. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we come back. And you can all do this. It's real simple. Class, if you would like to ask a question or two or three, and it relates to preparedness, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Kyle's with me. And Kyle, I really appreciate you teaching this class about tires, because frankly, I have never heard a class taught on the radio at this level about tires. Never. Have you?
Nope. I have never. Well, a whole bunch of stuff we discussed, Vince. Very rarely do you ever, I've never heard anybody talk on the radio. There's YouTube channels sometimes that'll talk about some of this stuff, but as far as being on the radio, you're it.
So Kyle, here's a couple thoughts. Now, you were describing taking a spray bottle. And class, you can use one of those plant-type spray bottles. We bought 6 of them at Sam's Club many, many years ago in a package, $5.99 for 6 of them, and they hold about a quart of water. And we have them for different purposes. One is for training the cats, and when the cats will climb on something that we set it to a stream, and we can just hit that cat from 10 feet away, and the cat will say, it's really not comfortable being here, so let me jump off. Another thing that we use them for is for mixing detergent, and we set it to more of a spray, and we mark each one of these with a Sharpie. So we'll say Dawn water. So really what that means is there's Dawn, 1 teaspoon of Dawn dishwashing detergent, hand dishwashing detergent in the quart of water, and we shake it up, and then we spray it, as Kyle was saying, around the bead, where the bead meets the rim of the tire. If we're looking for a leak, you can also spray it on the sidewall. You can spray it on the tread, and look for a leak, and you can plug the tires if you want, if you learn how to do that. But you can also find a leak where you might not think it's obvious, and that is at the valve stem Okay? So if you take off the valve cap, you might find a leak there. You might find it around the valve stem where the valve stem mates with the wheel. Kyle, would you describe the procedure that you use for testing to see if the valve stem is leaking? Or the valve in the valve stem, the Schrader valve?
There's a little tiny valve screwed in there, and it takes a special kind of it's not really complicated, but it is unique. It's the slotted little tiny tube that goes around the top side of the Schrader valve that's inside that valve stem. And so you stick that around that little slot to match up with the part of the Schrader valve, and you can unscrew it. But when you tighten that down, before you add air to a tire, you tighten that down, and then you put air in the tire to air it up. Then this Schrader valve allows air in and prevents air from going out. But yes, when you get done with it and you get some air in it, you get it all set up, you take that bottle that you're talking about and you'll squirt just a little tiny bit of it in there to that Schrader valve and see if you got any bubbles coming out of that Schrader valve. If you do, then you got to replace it. So be careful when you take those. If it's got air pressure in the tire and you undo the Schrader valve, that's just like opening up a big vent. And if you don't have a hold of it and are paying attention so that you can as you're unscrewing it, you can grab the Schrader valve, keeping pressure on the little wrench that you're using to turn the Schrader valve out. You're keeping pressure there so that when you get ready, you can grab that Schrader valve and pull it out of the way, and then keep everything out of the way of that, because it will really come out of there. It'll whistle and everything else. So you'll know that. But even if you do you replace the Schrader valve, put a new one in there, and you check it. Once you replace it with a new Schrader valve and you put pressure in there and you put a little soapy water on top of it and you see that it's not leaking, take your air hose or something usually has to be an air hose with enough volume, and blow the air, blow the soapy mixture out of that Schrader valve, and then you put your valve stem on there. That's what I've always done.
Yeah, and so class, here's several things to think about. If you're as old as I am, almost 70, and you rode a bicycle when you were a child, the bicycles typically came with a valve cap for the inner tube that had this little tool on it, and it was kind of like a fork almost at the end of the valve cap, and they were made out of metal, and you could turn that around and take the Schrader valve, this little valve. And what is that? That's that little valve you push in with your thumbnail or your fingernail and let air out of the tire. That's what we're talking about. That's called the Schrader valve. And you can unscrew that and you can replace those. So if that's leaking, there are a couple things you can do. One is you can take compressed air from a compressor and try to fill that tire valve stem with air and push the tire chuck on off like, and that may blow any dirt that may be causing the Schrader valve to leak. If that doesn't work, then replace the Schrader valve. And they're very inexpensive. Very inexpensive. You can probably buy 10 of them for $5. We'll be right back talking more about tires. Class, if you'd like to call us with your preparedness question, no one has yet. That's okay. But if you want to be the first, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. We're talking about tires, wheels, balancing, and we've got a lot more to teach you about this specific topic that I've never heard, nor has Kyle ever heard anyone discuss like this on the radio. Okay, so you know that you can replace the Schrader valve, but one other thing you can do is you can take that spray bottle with Dawn or Palmolive or the equivalent detergent, and you can wiggle that valve stem where it meets the wheel. You can move it left, right, and see if there's any leaks coming when you move it. Okay? So that's another thing you can do. What we do is if we're looking for a a leak in a tire, we will raise the vehicle up. And you can do it raising one wheel at a time. Make sure you use jack stands and you're very careful and you chalk the wheel so the car doesn't go rolling, and hurt you. Use all the safety precautions. And, maybe I should say this. Don't do anything that we've mentioned in this class. Okay? Don't do anything. Don't believe anything that we say. Do your own research. Okay? But here's what I do. I'll raise the vehicle up, and if I have a bottle jack, that's one of those jacks that it's a hydraulic jack, and you pump up this lever and it pushes hydraulic fluid, and the jack raises, and you can use that under the vehicle, and you put a jack stand under for safety so that if the bottle jack fails, and you should never trust a hydraulic jack, because it can leak and fail instantly, and if it does, you can get hurt. So we always put jack stands under to additionally support a vehicle that we raise. And then, if you have what I do is if I have the vehicle up and I want to check to see if there's a leak, I'll spray the tire down and rotate it while I spray it, and I'll look for leaks. And sometimes I'll find a nail or a screw or something like that, or stone, believe it or not, from the road that has punctured the tire. And then we decide how we're going to repair that tire. Now, the tire plugs are common, and you can buy them at the Chinese factory outlet, or you can buy them at AutoZone or wherever you want in the internet. But they're not recommended. They say it's not safe. Well, I have never had one fail. Never. Because we're very careful how we do it. But the approved method for repairing a hole in a tire tread is with a patch plug. Now, patch plug looks like a witch's cap. Okay? It has a wide brim and a point. And it has like a tail on this thing. And what you do is you thread this patch plug from the inside. You have to dismount the tire, thread it from the inside, and pull it out. So the patch is the round disc that's attached to this tail or plug, and it will fill the hole and have a large area, maybe like the size of a silver dollar, which is cemented to the inside of the tire. So it seals both ways, and it fills the hole. So it's a great way to go, but you have to dismount the tire, and you have to have a tire grinder where you grind off part of the rough surfaces of the inside of the tire. You make it flat, and you use cement, tire cement, and so it's a longer process. And typically, instead of taking 2 minutes, it takes 20 minutes. And typically it costs $20, $25 if you have somebody do it. But that's the best way to do it. Kyle, any comments?
No, you're right, Vince. But like you said, I don't really, Vince, in all honesty, I don't know anyone that uses that anymore. I've seen it, and I've seen it many times, many years ago. That used to be the common way of fixing stuff. If they dismount the tire anymore, what I have seen is they will rough up that area, where say a nail poked through. If they do it from the inside, which almost all tire shops will, because they're not going, the tire plug is as you said, they're the one you do from the outside, they don't consider permanent. But the only way I've ever seen them do it for the last 15, 20 years has been they will take their little buffer and buff the inside around where the nail came through, and they'll mark that, and then they'll buff it real good, and they'll just put a patch over the inside, heavy-duty patch that's approximately, I'd say, 1.5 inches wide by 2 inches long, and they will put that lengthwise with the inside of the tire and mount that way. But and then that glue it to that over the hole, and that's considered patched and ready to go. And that's the only way I've ever seen it for many, many years now.
Yeah, we use the patch plugs, and as I said, it takes us a lot longer to do it the way we do it. And we have boxes of these patch plugs. They come 10 in a box. We've got all different sizes, for big holes, little holes, etc. And one of the things that you'll see tire guys do, and I don't like this, if they have a hole in the tire, let's say a nail hole or a screw hole, they'll take a drill, they'll pull the nail out, and then they'll take a drill and then they'll drill it out, and then they'll put a plug in it. Now, when you drill it out, the likelihood of drilling through one of the steel belt cords is really high. I don't like breaking a steel cord. What I would do, if I were going to use a plug, as a matter of fact, I modified the tools, the needle that you thread a plug in with. I modified it so it's really, really sharp and really, really small, so that it doesn't enlarge the hole any larger than it already is. But that's what tire guys do. They enlarge the hole and they put a bigger patch in it. And I don't like that. So, that's just another comment. Robert in Kansas, welcome. You're on with Kyle.
Hey, Vincent. I don't have any comments on tires, but I did hear Kyle's opening monologue, and I wanted to say that about that I am glad that Biden is in there now as opposed to Trump. And that might sound odd, but the reason I say that is that Biden is openly anti-American. He is openly anti-white, anti-Christian, and an open communist. And so Trump was all those things as well, but he lied about it. So hopefully Biden will wake up the right people in this country, and we can start to push back against these people. But, and I know it seems like Trump was the good guy, but he really wasn't. And now we're dealing with someone who's actually being honest about it. So maybe we can organize on this side of things and start to move in the right direction.
Isn't it interesting how President Donald Trump was not a Bible-thumping guy? And Joe Biden goes to church. I don't know how these guys can go to church and do the damage that they do. It's hypocrisy at the highest level. But I appreciate your comment, Robert.
And I agree with you, Robert. I don't see that Trump was a great deal either. He had the right words and the right ideals that he talked about, but he was still spinning us into oblivion. And I agree with you. It's going to, at least now we see it for what it is. The question that I keep putting out to people is, at what point does it become so critical to you and to me that we do something more dramatic about it?
Well, if they do really take the guns, and the thing about taking the guns, gentlemen, is they don't actually want the guns. What they want is your property and your children. It's just a lot easier to take them if you're disarmed. So maybe that will be the spark right there, Kyle. But you mentioned the money system as well. If they really do drive the current system into the ground, we have to do the same thing Russia did in 2007. They nationalized their central bank, meaning that whenever they tax the people, the taxes actually stay in Russia as opposed to going to private central bankers. And if America were to do something similar, we could actually have a fair money system again, maybe go back to gold or silver, and it wouldn't be taxed away from us to the trillionaires that it is now. So that's one thing. But then we will be at war with that international banking system that has taken down so many nations before. We see what they're doing to Iran. We see what they're doing to Venezuela. Anyone who won't play ball. And Russia now, they're cutting off Russia from the SWIFT system. And we will probably be at war with Russia soon because we're still on that central banker side. So I think that really is the solution, is we nationalize our banking system. We keep our own money here. And but yeah, we would go to war over that too. They would sick China on us at that point. So it is a big mess and a wild future that we're going to see in front of us for sure.
Agreed.
Well, thank you so much for calling in, Robert. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Vince. Bye.
Okay. All right, back to tires. And, tires come from lots of different countries. Indonesia, Taiwan, Thailand, Mexico, all over. And we make some tires. But we don't make them all. And as a matter of fact, you can even buy let's say you buy 4 tires, and you look on the sidewall, you may find that 2 of them are made in Mexico and 2 of them are made in Taiwan. And I'm talking about a matched set of 4 tires. And I'm not kidding. So we've seen that. We've seen that here. We were talking about, initially the red dot on tires. Red rules. So it's as simple as this. When you have your tires mounted, make sure the red dot goes right next to the valve stem. Okay? So there could be a yellow dot. Yellow is secondary. If there are 2 dots, you really want the red dot to the, aligned with the valve stem. Okay. So let's talk about mounting tires. And here's something, this is kind of a pet peeve of mine. Before we had our own tire mounting machine, for as long as I've seen other people mount tires, they typically have young guys mounting tires because they're heavy. It's hard work. And, if it's not for a weakling, you got to be pretty strong to mount tires. Well, what typically happens is the guy will put the tire on the machine to mount the new tire. And what is required is you take this lubricant. It's a rubber lubricant, and it's usually on a wand that goes in a container on the tire mounting machine. And there's this liquid lubricant that is water soluble. So you add this. It's almost like detergent. It makes the tire as slippery as if you added detergent, but it's not corrosive. So it's a special lubricant for mounting tires. And the inside and the outside bead area, the bead area is lubricated with this tire lubricant. And it's wet. And most of the time, the guys that mount tires don't do that. And when they don't do that, it causes the tire spoon, which is the tool that mounts the tire, to shred the bead area of the tire, ripping off part of your tire. We'll be right back. So one of the things that really bothers me when I watch people mount tires is they don't use the lubricant and when they seat the tire. And what that typically does is it forces the rubber to scrape off the bead. And there's what's called a bead bundle. And that bead bundle is all of these cords that are wrapped around and around and around the bead, encased in the rubber, so that the tire itself doesn't fly off the wheel. Okay, that's what holds the tire from flipping off the wheel because it's under so much pressure, especially when you hit a bump. Well, the guys that I've seen don't use lubricant, most of them, and it shreds the bead area. And I hate that. And what that also does is it causes the tire to be a different weight now because you just stripped off part of the tire, the rubber of the tire. You just don't see it because it's concealed by the wheel. Kyle, do you have any comments about that? Have you seen that as well?
I have seen that, Vince. In fact, I've had tires that I've bought like at a garage sale or something along those lines, and then you get the bead leaking, and once you have the tire checked out or you bust it apart, take a look at it, you'll see that very thing where it looks like little chafing marks where that spoon has caught the inside edge of that bead and tore it, for lack of a better term. But you're correct. But most of the guys around here that I have watched always use that lubricant. They don't just slop it around. But I have bought tires that absolutely you could tell has not had that lubricant on it.
Now you live in a pretty cool area, so here's what we do. When we have a customer coming for tires, first of all, they don't get them right then and there. So, for example, typically if you go to a tire shop, a big box store, you say, I need some tires and what's on sale. And you talked about that. And, they'll sell you what they have. And we don't have much in stock. We have some, but not much. And so what we do is we order it and it's here tomorrow. We buy it from the largest tire company in the country. The same company that Sam's and Walmart and all the other, the big tire, box stores buy from. So we buy the same place. And so we place the order and we get them tomorrow. So what happens is we look at the vehicle today and we tell the customer, here are our thoughts, here's our recommendation, the make, model, and cost of the tires, and then they can bring their vehicle back tomorrow, and we can do the work. And that's kind of the way we do it. So we don't rush anything. So we have the tires ahead of time. And what we do is we put them in the sun. And the reason for that is we want to make the tire more supple, more pliable, so that it mounts easier for us, and it's easier on the tire. But that's what we do. But who else does that, Kyle?
Nobody. I've never even heard of it
Who puts
before.
Yeah.
Nobody does that.
But it makes sense.
It does, absolutely.
But it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, anything warmer like that is going to be a lot more pliable. It's common sense. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yep. So that's, and these are all the reasons why it takes us so long to do automotive repair work. All right. So class, when you have your tires done, the takeaway so far are the red dot goes to the valve stem, and you want to make sure that they use the tire lubricant. So when you go to the counter and you order your tires, you might want to tell the guy, listen, a couple of things I'd like. One is I want to make sure the red dot goes to the valve stem. Two, write this, handwrite this as a note to the mechanic that I also want him to use the tire lubricant. Okay. And there are a couple other things, and I'll tell you what they are in a second. So that comes to torquing the wheels. Now what happens is there are typically 5 lug nuts or 5 lug bolts on a wheel. There may be 6, there may be 8, and there may be even more. Well, depending on the size of the vehicle. Well, there is a specific torque that those we'll call them lug nuts. Let's call them lug nuts as a generic term. They may be lug bolts, but we'll call them lug nuts. There's a specific torque that they are required to be torqued down to. Too little of a torque, meaning not tight enough, they can loosen and the wheel can come off the vehicle. Too tight and you can damage the wheel, and you can damage the threads, and you can damage the lug nuts. So they have to be done properly, and there's a sequence. Because if you've got 5 of them, you start with, let's say 12 o'clock, and then the next one you torque down might be at 4 o'clock. And then the next one, you go diagonally across. Now we're talking with Kyle about tires. And I was starting with a 5-lug wheel. Let's go to a 6-lug wheel. It's easier to describe on the radio. So when you reattach the wheel to the vehicle, there is a sequence. So let's say you have 6 lug nuts, and you look at position the top, and you say, okay, the first lug nut we're going to start to tighten would be at 12 o'clock. The next one would be directly opposite that. That would be at 6 o'clock. Then the next one would be at about 2 o'clock. And then directly opposite that would be around 7 o'clock. And then the next one would be at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock. And then directly opposite that would be around 10 o'clock. So that's the sequence, okay? You don't go around in a circle. You go straight across from one side of the hub to the other side. And when I put wheel bolts or lug nuts on a vehicle, I do it in a sequence, and it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. So each time I tighten the lug nut, I go in the sequence that I just mentioned. So the first one will get tightened to 20 foot-pounds. That's if you had a wrench 1 foot long, you put 20 pound weight in the very end of it, that'd be 20 foot-pounds. 20 pounds at 1 foot. Then, so I go all the way around I go from lug nut to lug nut in the pattern that I described. And you can look that up. You can just type in your search engine, wheel bolt, torque pattern. And you'll find that. So I start with 20 pounds and I get them all to 20. Then I go to 40 pounds. Then I go to 60 pounds. Then I go to 80 pounds. And then let's say my final number is 100. Now, that final number is wheel and vehicle specific. So you have to look up the torque specs for your particular vehicle. But what I'm saying is, the guys at the tire shop don't go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps. They do it in one step. So they take what's called a torque stick, they put it on their impact gun, and they they tighten up the first lug nut to 100 pounds, for example. Then they go to the next one, 100 pounds, 100 pounds. And if you do that, the likelihood of bending your wheel is quite significant. And the wheel manufacturers, the tire manufacturers, I'm sorry, the vehicle manufacturers say don't do that. They say don't use an impact gun on your wheels because you can bend the wheels. And if you bend the wheels, they will not ride properly. It'll feel like the tires are out of balance. Kyle?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Vince. I don't tend to do mine as many steps as you do, but I agree with you. I used about 20 pounds to go on there, and then I'll probably run it personally. I'll run it up to about 50, 60 pounds, and then usually mine end up around 100. And so then, and I do it exactly like you said. I do the opposite pattern. You jump around from side to side to side to side, kind of diagonally across the tire. And then I'll go on the third step. I will usually go to full tight. This is extremely critical, folks. I cannot tell you enough how extremely critical this is. It's critical all the time, but it's extremely critical if you're tightening steel lug nuts onto an aluminum rim. My daughter has a Subaru. I will give you an example of this in a bad way. This Subaru, they had tightened the wheels up on it, probably like Vince said. I don't know. I wasn't there. But she's driving along the road. Thank God she was in town. And she actually had my two little granddaughters with her. And all of a sudden, this horrible rumbling sound happened. And because they had loosened up so badly, and she really wasn't paying attention. And back and forth and that kind of thing. And the tire, the rim, everything fell right off across railroad tracks. Now, they were abandoned railroad tracks, so it didn't matter in the sense of a train coming or something like that. But that's exactly what happened. So anytime you get rims are aluminum, in fact, most of the tire shops around here will tell you, please come back after 24 hours, drive it around today and tomorrow or whatever, 24 to 48 hours, come back and let us retorque your rims. And that's a standard practice around here to the tire shops that I go to. Vince?
But I'll bet you they don't use a torque wrench. I'll bet you they use a torque stick on an impact gun. Is that right?
No, sir. Actually, the one that I use nothing but torque wrenches with the clicker on it.
Wow. Yep. It must be a small shop.
Yep, it is.
Okay. Well, that's very, very unusual. And you have a great fortune, to have technically capable guys work on vehicles out there. Here, it's not quite that, it's not the case because people here are more in a hurry and, they're profit motivated. But, something I do that is not recommended by any automotive manufacturer, and that is I use copper coat on the mating surface of the lug nut to the wheel and on the threads of the studs, the wheel studs. Now, I do that because we take the wheels on and off a lot. We balance our tires and rotate our tires every 5,000 miles. But that's because we have a tire balancer. But if you buy, and a lot of people buy tires, and included in the purchase price of the tire balancing add-on to their tire purchase is usually a lifetime balance. So they have the ability to get for free rebalancing, but hardly anybody does that. We do. We take we have a lift and we put our vehicles up on the lift and we will, rotate our tires. And what that means is you take them off one corner of the car and you put it on another corner. And the reason you do that is because the tires wear differently. The rear tires wear differently from the front tires. Whether you have front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, they wear differently. So if you rotate them, move them from one wheel to another, one corner to another, you'll get generally more wear out of that same set of tires. Well, and there's a specific way of doing it. And each vehicle manufacturer has in the owner's manual the exact method that they want you to use to rotate your tires. So we check from rebalancing. And if they need it, we rebalance them. And what we find out is that after 5,000 miles, there's wear on the tires, and they're not as balanced as they were in the beginning. So we rebalance them, and then we rotate them while we have the wheels and tires off the vehicle. So, for example, if you have a rear-wheel drive or an all-wheel drive vehicle, you take the rear wheels and you move them directly to the front. So the passenger rear tire goes to the passenger front corner. The driver's rear tire goes to the driver's front corner. And then the tires from the front get crisscrossed. So the driver's front goes to the passenger rear, and the passenger front goes to the driver's rear. That's typically what you do with rear wheel and all-wheel drive tires if you want to rotate them. Now, if you have a front wheel drive vehicle, it's a little different. Now, front-wheel drive vehicles wear out the front tires a lot faster than they wear out the rear tires. So you take the front tire and you move it directly to the rear. So passenger side front goes to the passenger side rear. The driver's side front goes to the driver's side rear. And the passenger side rear goes to the driver's side front. And the driver's side rear goes to the passenger side front. That is typically how tires are rotated, unless you have 5 tires and wheels. And fewer and fewer vehicles now come with a full-size spare tire. So if you have a full-size spare tire, the rotation is a little different. Kyle, any comments about tire rotation?
No, you hit it right on the numbers, Vince. That's exactly what you do. I will say one thing about balancing tires, though. If you run studded tires like you live up here where we do, paying attention to the car going down the road, if you start to feel the vibration, slight vibration in the seat of the tire of the car you're driving, that usually, not always, but usually indicates lost studs out of the back, or your rear tires are out of balance. If you feel the vibration going down the road in your steering wheel, that usually means that the balance is out on one of the tires in the front. If you lose studs, it will throw. It's just like taking weights off of your tire. So if you lose studs, you're going to need to go back and get them rebalanced soon. Because if you have a tire that you run out of balance for very long, it's just like running a tire that has the out of round. It's almost exactly the same thing, and it'll have the exact same result in that it will break belts, the belt inside the tire, and you'll ruin the tire.
Mm-hmm. Kyle, do you use copper coat on any studs or wheel bolts?
No, I don't, Vince. I have seen. You're right, and it's a great idea. But around here, I do spray them down with something with like Power Blaster, or I will use a little bit of wheel bearing grease to put on them, and then I will wipe it very clean. Now, like you said, the tire manufacturers tell you to not do this, so don't do what we do. But I will put a little bit of grease on it, or I'll spray it down with Power Blaster or something like that to take the tire off, and then I will clean them really dry before I put the bolt back on there. I'm a little bit afraid, especially for my wife's car and stuff like that. Even when you torque them down, if you have copper coat on there, it does protect the threads, but it can. And I don't check her tires every time I change the oil. I don't check her tires, but I should, but I don't. And so I'm a little concerned that something would back off of her tire or mine, and she would not notice it, and lose a tire. So in a sense, I don't do that one thing, Vince. We finally found something that we don't do. the same.
Sometimes I use red wheel bearing grease, but the reason that we feel it's okay, and it's different for us. It's different for us because we have a lift, and because every time we change the oil, which would be, let's say, 3,000 or 4,000 miles typically, maybe 5,000 at the most. The reason that I feel it's okay is because we check when we put one of our vehicles up on the lift, we check all of these things every time. So we're always checking belts, hoses, differential fluid, transmission fluid, wheel bolts, rotating the tires. So that's the reason. And if we did not do it, we would wear out the lug studs and the lug nuts and actually the mating surface on the wheels from the friction of taking these lug nuts on, off, especially on the aluminum magnesium wheels. So what you've learned so far is, number one, when you have your tires done, red dot. Number two, you write down on the service order, use tire lubricant. Number three, hand torque lug nuts. Those are 3 requirements that you should insist on. We'll be right back. To mention, and that is, we have a tire balancing machine, and it's John Bean, and it is the Snap-on tire balancing machine. And we bought it used, and it's top of the line. Paid about $400 for it, had to get some parts for it, and converted from 3-phase to split phase, and so maybe $600, and we're up and running. Well, there's a rounding. You program these things, and you can program them to round the amount of weight that it tells you to put in certain places. Well, we set our rounding to no rounding. So what I'm saying is you can have a tire shop have their wheel balancer set to round off to the nearest half an ounce. And half an ounce, it seems like a lot of weight to me, but you can have your tires balanced and the guy will say they're perfect, but the rounding has been built into the programming that can be set by the tire shop to be off as much as a half an ounce. So what I'm saying is all tire balances are not set the same. They're not all equal. All tire guys are not the same. All tires are not the same. All installers are not of the same level of information and care. So that was one thing. Another thing I wanted to mention was there's dynamic balancing and static balancing. I mentioned static balancing with the bubble balancer. That is balancing the tire if it's not moving. Well, the only time your tire is not moving is when you're not driving your vehicle, right? But who cares whether the tire is balanced if it's not moving or not? Well, I care about when it is moving. So that kind of balancing is called dynamic balancing. And in order to balance the tires, there's several things that have to be done. The tire balancing machine needs to know about certain things, like the diameter of the wheel. It also needs to know the offset, and that is how much the wheel is sticking in or out from the original manufacturer's offset. You've seen what's called a lower offset or a negative offset. What that means is the wheels are sticking out farther than they're supposed to be. Okay, that's really hard on the wheel bearings of the car, whether it be the front wheel bearings or the rear wheel bearings, the rear axle bearings, the rear wheel bearings, whatever you want to call it. It's very hard on the bearings, whether the offset is pushing a tire and wheel in or out. And most of the time, you'll see these ridiculous looking vehicles with the wheels sticking out. That's brutal on the wheel bearings. Very hard on them. And it's kind of like, if you want to know what that's like, it's like trying to hold a 5-pound bag of sugar with your outstretched arm, okay, compared to holding that 5-pound bag of sugar close to your chest. That is an exaggeration of what the negative offset or the positive offset is like for the wheel bearing. Brutal on it. Any comments, Kyle?
Absolutely true, Vince. I have actually not bought cars for the reason that they have those huge offsets on the rims. Because you're exactly right. You'll replace the wheel bearings, in my opinion, probably 2-to-1 compared to one that has the rim and the tire directly as close to the bearing inline face as you can get.
Mm-hmm. So that's another thing to think about when you buy wheels. The wheels that you want, in my opinion, are the ones right from the manufacturer. They're the safest. And I was watching Rockford. And, I'm talking about the Rockford Files. I like James Baumgartner, his real name, trades as James Garner. But anyway, he would be in these car chases, and he did, a really neat, 180 degree turn. But he had steel wheels, heavy duty steel wheels on his Pontiac Firebird. But the guys that were chasing him, trying to catch him, they would be like in a big, Cadillac or a big Ford or a big Chevy, and you'd see him coming around a corner really fast, and the hubcaps would fly off. Now, why would the hubcaps fly off? Because the wheels distort. They actually bend under these stressful conditions. And when the wheel distorts or bends, the hubcap loses its gripping surfaces and flies off. So what I'm saying is, you may think that a wheel is rock solid and doesn't bend. Absolutely not true. I'm talking about steel wheels now. Steel wheels bend. Kyle, have you ever thought about that?
Yes, I sure have. I mean, I've noticed it and seen it, and I've known it for many, many years. We had an old 67 Impala one time. I did SS that I was kind of hot riding around, and that thing happened, and it dawned on me right when I think I was 16 when I had that car. And it dawned on me at that time, the rims had to flex for that thing to come off. And it was an eye opener for me.
Okay, here's another thing that class you may not think about, and that is that wheels, because of this flexing, actually can crack. The wheel can literally crack inside where you can't see it and start leaking air, and you can have a wheel failure. I'm talking about a steel wheel. So wheels wear out, believe it or not. So if you have a trailer and it's a heavily loaded trailer and you're going around a lot of corners and bumps, the wheel can literally crack. I've got some cracked wheels. And where were they made? China. I bought a trailer. It came with Chinese wheels, these white wagon wheels, and they cracked. And so what do we use them now for? Paperweights. They're in the barn, and I'm probably going to hang hoses on them, mount them to the wall, and, drape hoses over them. That's all they're good for. So be careful. And you might want to make sure that if you buy a trailer that the wheels are the right size for the trailer. Kyle, thank you so much for being with us.